Welcome to this week's episode of the Python People podcast, the home for global technology leaders to share insights with the tech community. My name is Guy Bevington. I'm the MD of True North Recruitment Group. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Rolf Britten. Rolf, happy Friday. How the devil are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Not a worry at all. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, Rolf, you and I got chatting quite recently, and I think to sort of frame the episode today and put a bit of a theme over what we're going to talk about. So you are an experienced data science professional who has particular knowledge and domain experience in the world of insurance. And one of the things that I love about data science really is understanding how it can be applied to specific use cases and solve particular problems in certain sectors. And with your extensive background in insurance, you're somebody clearly in a very unique position to share some real insight around how data science can be applied specifically to the actuarial world and insurance pricing models and that kind of thing. So we thought, let's get together, have a bit of a chat, and pick your brains on it, and sort of see what insights we can share. So before we kind of delve into that, I'd like to invite you, if I may, just to give us a brief background about yourself and your career bio to date, and we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I guess taking it quite far back to sort of when I graduated with a master's degree, didn't really know what I wanted to be doing, but I knew that the modules that I'd enjoyed more were the sort of more application modules, so statistical modeling, and also done some electives in sort of finance. So came across the actuarial career path and sort of tried applying to every graduate scheme under the sun, had sort of really quite poor success at that. And then as a slight change in tack, I sort of did a bit of an internship or some work experience at an insurance company and decided that actually it doesn't have to be actuarial, just like the insurance world has a lot of lots of interesting facets to it. So lots of interesting problems to solve from both a mathematical and also a societal perspective. So I just tried to pivot slightly, just decided to get a role in the insurance industry and see where that took me. And I guess my first role was a bit of a foot in the door role in a support function. And then after about a year, moved to a team that was focused on risk pricing. And I guess that was my first sort of role that did predictive modeling. But back in those days, that was about 6 years ago, it was all the data analysis was done in SAS and sort of manually building GLN, generalized linear models, in quite a laborious manner. But I think I joined at a time where there was increased focus and excitement around what you can do with R and Python to really add loads of value of that, starting to use sort of data science techniques, sort of where the key buzz around data science was really starting to kick off, and we started to really think about how we can use new open source technologies to build better predictive models more efficiently. And I think I was sort of had a key role in the transformation that our risk pricing had from the more traditional methods to moving towards a more forward-looking advanced model forms. So it's a key role as an analyst in that. And then when my manager was promoted to head of data science for the pricing team, I stepped into his manager's shoes and then followed him into the data science team after about another year. So hopefully that gives a sort of good background as to my data science experience. A lot of it hasn't had the data science label, but has been applying data science techniques to, I guess, quite a traditional and long-standing analytics and predictive modeling use case, and really passionate about driving that forward and using the latest and greatest technologies and ways of doing things to deliver the most value there.
Fantastic. Yeah, great stuff. Thank you very much. It's really interesting, and it is always really interesting when you sort of think about data science, and I guess you break it down into its constituent parts, and a lot of the concepts actually that exist within the world of data science, around analytics, statistical modeling, even the languages like Python, they're not new really. If you think about it, it's a lot of these concepts have been around for a long time, but it's just, like you say, the whole kind of frenzy that exists around the world of data science now is kind of a buzz label. I guess it's all of those things coming together, isn't it, in one sort of approach or one sort of concept, which, you know, and the rise, I guess, of sort of new, really interesting open source tools, you know, that kind of have just really captured the imagination of a lot of people, and now it really is, you know, for a lot of our clients, kind of the beating heart or the driving change in their sort of tech strategy is around the you know, employing data science and machine learning to sort of really turbocharge their business. So yeah, it's actually really interesting when you kind of think about how it's come into different sectors, and certainly in the world of actuarial and insurance, you know, I guess being a very numerate and sort of statistical based industry as it is, you know, you can certainly see how there is a real need and you know, real value add that can come from employing data science in the right way. So yeah, I guess with that in mind, I mean, do you want to talk us through then your experience so far of just how data science can be applied to you know, insurance pricing models?
Yeah, so I think like the insurance pricing is probably one of the most well-established analytics use cases that there exists across many industries, and I from my very biased point of view, I'd say probably one of the most pivotal for the success of a company. For an insurance company, personal lines in the UK, who a lot of them sell their business almost exclusively through aggregators or price comparison websites, I should say. Pardon my jargon. So yeah, they are price comparison websites. People go on there because they want to buy the quote that offers them the cheapest price. So every one of these maybe 100 insurance companies is essentially bidding for business that they cannot know the true value of, where the cheapest price wins. So where you have where you can build a better predictive model than your competitor, then you are going to really reap the rewards in that through this process called anti-selection. So like in the sort of degenerative case where if a new insurer entered the market and they were selling all their policies for £500 regardless of customer details, then they would only ever pick up the business where all their competitors were quoting them £1,000, £1,500, the really risky new drivers by riding new drivers with a way overspec car, these people that you just really don't want. But if they're not able to capture that risk through their pricing models, then they're going to have horrendous claims experience. They're going to go bust pretty quickly. And so I think data science and the new techniques that it offers is kind of the logical conclusion to that. So I said, yeah, the sort of the null case where you charge everyone the same premium, that probably would have been where the market started 100 years ago. And then from that, you'd have your underwriters just looking at one-way trends and making manual adjustments to an 18-year-old's price, loading it by 10%, etc., just on a one-way basis. And then that developed later on to looking at multivariate models, so linear regression, basically. And now, how do you add more value to that structure? And I think leveraging model forms and data science technique that really give you a lot more predictive power and the ability to refresh your models at a much higher cadence is the great way for most insurance companies, I think, to improve their predictive models. That, as I've tried to demonstrate, I think is absolutely key to their success, to the point where I would almost describe it as a bit of an arms race between the different insurers, a sort of, a race to, as quickly as possible, build the latest models that give you the best discrimination between the risk of your potential customers, and take into account the latest trends so that they can select against their competitors, and really make massive profits off the back of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, it becomes, when you explain it like that, such a real kind of valid use case, isn't it, about how data science can genuinely give you a really competitive advantage if you know, you use it in the right way. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, in your experience so far, obviously a very specific use case around pricing models and things like that. But what other applications of data science do you feel excited about in the wider insurance sector? Are there any kind of other areas that you feel, aside from pure calculation of price against risk, are there any other areas that you feel it can add real value from what you've seen?
Yeah, so there are, I guess, I think that quite a lot of insurers are focusing a lot now, obviously also on their price, obviously primarily on their pricing, but then also in like claims analytics. So sort of the triaging of claims when they come in, and trying to use data science or decision science to make the optimal offers, for example, for liability claims when you've got based on what solicitor is representing, etc. These things, and using these sort of techniques to improve the customer experience from that, and ultimately cut down the expense burden from having to deal with these claims, which again allows you to offer cheaper prices, which allows you to be more competitive. And then the other area being what is called sort of customer analytics, so looking at the customer journey. Insurance isn't a proposition that most customers are particularly excited about. It's a requirement by law or from their mortgage providers, so they just want to have the easiest experience possible, and sort of get out of the way and generally not think about it for another year. So how can we learn about sort of what that experience means to the customer through the different touch points in their cycle, and optimize that for that, and make them want to stay with their current insurer? I think is another key use case that is being explored quite a lot at the moment. I think there's one other as well that I think is, my feeling is that it's being underutilized. So another key actuarial area for insurers is reserving. So that is making sure that you put enough money away basically to service the claims that you're expecting. So for the claims that occurred 3 months ago, how much money do you need to put aside for them to make sure that you can pay for the ultimate amount that they're going to settle at with 95% probability or 99.5% probability? And my feeling is that the techniques that are used, that they definitely work, but they've been used and reused and just refreshed every quarter for the last, maybe 50 years. So I think rethinking that, it could be somewhere where you get real value, where you can actually predict where individual claims will settle at, and then do that across your whole book rather than just considering your whole book and where that's going to end at. So that is, something that I feel is like not currently explored, but is somewhere where a lot of value could be added. But I would still say that the use case that I'm most excited about, to use your words, is still pricing. So when I went through a sort of job search process recently, I had to sort of think about whether or not I wanted to sort of double down on my pricing experience or try and get a bit more generalist data science experience, maybe a slight little bit of a pivot. But I think through that process, maybe this comes across when I'm speaking, I realize I'm quite passionate about the pricing use case, and in particular the sort of competitive or almost combative nature of it between the different insurers. To sort of answer what I'm most excited about is probably still that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could see definitely how that can be a really fulfilling and exciting area of data science, and solving that particular problem, because it's just so complex, isn't it? And like you say, it's so fiercely competitive. There's kind of little margin for error. So when you do build something that brings success, I can imagine it's an immensely fulfilling feeling. But no, it's really interesting actually talking about in the different use cases and the different sort of applications of data science. And I can certainly see the whole customer analytics and the customer user experience and tracking that journey just from a consumer perspective. We recently went through we've got a new car and recently went through that whole insurance process, and it is genuinely, speaking personally, the most frictionless journey that you can experience is the one you're more likely to go with. We all know insurance obviously being able to sort of cross-sell different policies for different things is really key as well. So finding a way where data science can really improve that customer journey to make it as smooth and enjoyable. Like I say, I think it's very related to other areas of financial services, and really anything to do with money, where customers are spending money because they have to. Making that process as smooth and frictionless as possible is always going to be a winner. So yeah, I can certainly see there's a lot of value to be added there. So yeah, that's actually really interesting. So I guess actuarial science, clearly, like I say, it's been around for a long time. It is a very specific type of sort of numerate analysis and numerate science. And what do you feel, I guess, can be learned the other way around? So not necessarily in terms of how data science is applied to the world of actuarial pricing, etc., but how do you feel maybe the other way around? What could other people in the data science world maybe take from the older, kind of more mature science of actuarial science? Do you feel there's any kind of lessons that can be learned the other way?
Yeah, definitely. I think you spoke before about sort of how these actuarial techniques are very long-standing, and I think maybe the original data scientists in the 1700s sort of collecting mortality data and building statistical models off of that to better pool life insurance risk. That's obviously been around for 300 years, sort of very well, again, a very well established use case, and building a whole sort of society or faculty around that is, I don't know, really interesting. And I was sort of, when thinking about when we were going to have this chat, sort of thinking about whether or something like that could be feasible for data science. And I'm not sure it is, because I think data science sort of its key issues, or not key issues, one of the key things about it is that it's not a protected characteristic. There are so many job titles that are now labeled as data science because that is what they're doing, but it's sort of, or it's not very well defined. You could have ML engineer, a statistician. My old team's called pricing innovation, which is now rebranded, and rightly so, I think, as data science, because that's what we're doing. But then if you contrast that to the actuarial world, where you have this very protected characteristic and with kind of quite really high barriers to entry. So, if someone is a credentialed actuary, that they've very, very well trained, that to pass those exams, they have to be a very fast learner, which I think is crucial with the rate of change in data science. That they've got a really solid footing in the basics or the underlying principles for probability and statistics. And then you also know that they've got a high amount of discipline to actually be able to succeed through that exam process, which is quite strenuous. And I think, discipline is key determinant. And then you've also got things that sort of test other areas where data science and actuarial science overlap. So you've got specific exams which sort of test your ability to communicate effectively, and then also build models which are just Excel models, but build models in a way that is auditable and can be tracked easily by your colleagues, which are key skills. So I don't think well, I would be interested to hear your views. Do you think there could be any sort of industry-wide data science body that could sort of, I don't know, represent data scientists and also make sure that data science is represented properly in the media, because it does get a lot of attention at the moment, not all of it positive, for things like facial recognition, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I had no idea. Just you're getting back to a point about qualifications in the actuarial world, where there's exams around effective communication and things like that. That's pretty interesting. Is that around sort of how clearly you can communicate the points? Obviously, there's no miscommunication. Is that the premise of that? Or?
Yeah, so there are lots of, the exam will be, you get sort of a 5-page brief, and then you have to put out a communication that sort of summarizes that well, and make sure the salient points are gotten across in a 500-word brief. That's the sort of crux of that exam.
Oh, I see. Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's fair. It's all these things you don't really, I guess, know until you're in that kind of scenario. But no, I mean, to go back to your point about could there be some kind of external body? I mean, I guess data science, I still feel in many ways, as I say, it is becoming a real driving force in lots of businesses, but it's still really, it's quite an esoteric concept that obviously there's so many different disciplines and areas of data science, and like I said, there's so many people that label themselves data scientists, but actually when you kind of lift up under the hood and really understand, okay, what are they actually doing, it isn't always necessarily data science in many ways, in my opinion, actually what they're doing. And also, like I said, there's so many different use cases of data science. Some that are particularly, the decisions that are being made off the back of the algorithms that are being written are particularly critical decisions. And then you enter into this sort of ethical debate about at what point, what kind of use cases, what kind of situations and scenarios should there always be some form of human input versus actually allowing it to be, written by a decision to be made via an algorithm. So it is actually really, really interesting. And then you enter into this whole philosophical debate about, what is actually AI and intelligence, and what it is to kind of have sentience. And I don't know, it is very difficult. And I think it's a domain that, as I say, is still fresh, is still sort of so. Even though a lot of concepts have been around for a long time, bundled together into this sort of package of, I guess, really since the rise of sort of true machine learning, that's kind of really where data science, I think, has sort of kicked on. I think it is still sort of playing through and waiting to see kind of how it all pans out. But yeah, I mean, one of the areas that we, I guess, are always interested, or when I'm speaking to MDs and CEOs about data science, and it's one of those things that everybody knows they should be doing it, but in many cases they're not too sure why they should be doing it, or actually what problems necessarily are going to be solved. And I've had the conversation with a number of CEOs where they're talking about seeing ROI on a data science function, and I guess something like actuarial science, and just it must be quite tangible, quite measurable in terms of actually what data science techniques can bring to the table, and actually what difference it does make, I guess, in terms of the output and the results for an insurance company. But in many other industries where it's maybe not quite so immediately obvious and calculable straight away, a lot of companies do struggle with this concept of innovation and R&D versus demonstrable real world value, what's actually being driven from a data science team. So how do you see that relationship panning out between R&D, prototyping, new sort of research versus the need to actually demonstrate real world demonstrable value from a data science function?
Yeah, I think from a business perspective, like pure research and development, so research for research sake, there's that I would say there's probably not really any space for that really. You've got your your universities, your research teams, your NGOs that are gonna, I think that they rightly focus on that. But for a company, ultimately they are beholden to their shareholders usually, and they have to make decisions and do projects that are ultimately going to provide return on investment, as you rightly say. But that doesn't mean that that obviously doesn't mean there's no space for innovation. That doesn't mean there's no space for research and development. I think it has to be thought of in terms of risk versus reward. And you've got where you've identified a use case that has the potential to really streamline your processes, or really save you a bunch of money, or win loads more business, or whatever it is, then I think it's usually well worth the effort to investigate that, because I think you either succeed or you learn, or well, preferably both. But even if you don't succeed, then you will inevitably learn. And when you can have a long-term business strategy that puts data science, or puts data at the heart of its strategy, then you building up that experience within your business and within your people is I think going to definitely pay off in the end. I think just talk about my specific experience. You've said, it's a very easily demonstrable use case where it's easy to demonstrate the value, and just sort of talk about that a little bit more. So I think a lot of data science, maybe new sort of data science teams being spun up, or as you say, people wanting to start doing data science, but not necessarily knowing how. I think you often are in a situation where your first 20% of effort gets you 80% of your benefit. But I am in a very different situation where everyone's had pricing models for 10 plus years. But it's about trying to eke out not just the 80 to 100%, but actually the 99 to 100%, because you can I've seen papers demonstrating the link, the explicit and implicit link between the performance of your models measured in a metric such as Gini coefficient, and the loss ratio of your company, so the profitability of your company. And that link is something that we observe when we deploy new models, and it's something that can actually be sort of borne out through a simulated market as well. So I think that's it's quite different to your original question, but I think it's hopefully a very interesting alternative perspective on that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to go back to the point I was making earlier, I mean, I can genuinely see how, like I say, because you're working with very mature kind of data and models already. Just one of the kind of frustrations, I guess, that I hear very often from data scientists in the market is, the work they're doing, they never actually see really translating through to real world impact, or a lot of the stuff they do, it just always gets caught up R&D stage, and never actually makes it through to being applied into any kind of useful form of algorithm, etc. And I guess that's good in many ways, because if you've got a company that's sort of happy to continue to have a data science functioning without any rules, they've clearly got a lot of faith and value, faith in the concept that it's going to come through at some point. But no, I can imagine just how fulfilling and satisfying it is in your world to actually see it almost an immediate impact on what you're doing, and actually how quantifiable it is, and the kind of difference it makes for what you're actually working on. So
yeah, on the other side though, I speak about trying to get from 99 to 100%. Obviously when you're at that stage, a lot of the things you try don't work, so it's not immediate business benefit all the time, by any means.
Yeah, fair enough. Give yourself a bit of a get out of jail free card there. It's fascinating. But I mean, I think your point you meant there about framing of failure, I think that extrapolates out quite strongly to all areas of technology, to be honest, and businesses that realise that there is value in the journey, and actually R&D, when things don't go to plan and don't work out, that's not wasted time, wasted effort. It's like Thomas Edison and the light bulb, isn't it? If you've worked out another way, something doesn't work, which gets you closer to the way that things do work. So I think that's something that a lot of sort of leadership and powers that be in many companies struggle with from a technical perspective, really getting that concept. Yeah, it's interesting. But I guess on the note of sort of failure and mistake, I mean, what do you see? What are the biggest mistakes that you see quite commonly in insurance companies around their kind of data science practices? Are there any sort of core ideas you can share there?
Yeah, I think the main one maybe ties in quite nicely off the back of that, where we're talking about the value of learning, and maybe even if things aren't successful, then you want to be able to learn from them, but also where things are successful, you need to make sure that you're learning as much as you can from them. So I think there's possibility to sort of overlook experimental design when implementing these new solutions. So you've been through the R&D stage, you've got something that you're pretty sure is, you're very sure that it's going to deliver value, and then you just deploy it, and then okay, so it's deployed now, but then how do we measure if it's actually adding value. And I think this is particularly poignant in the insurance case, because there can be such long feedback loops where I sell a policy today, I don't know how well it is performed, maybe until 2 or 3 years time for everything, for the dust to really settle. So yeah, thinking really carefully about the design of your experiments, and being sure that you can monitor that and monitor the development of the benefit that you're getting over time, is something that I think can be easily overlooked, but is something that you should really be thinking carefully about when deploying something new, and especially if you've got these sort of very long or difficult feedback loops. So maybe I implement a claims analytics solution, and maybe I deployed it, at the start of a global pandemic. So yeah, claims volumes are through the floor, but how can I possibly, and I can, I can sell that as the new claims initiative having really good benefit, but how can you possibly tell that when there are so many other conflating factors? I think you need to really be implementing A/B trials with everything that you're doing with these sorts of things. In other areas, I think you could probably be a lot smarter, doing things like a multi-armed bandit approach will allow you to learn probably at more of an optimal pace, but that relies on the very quick feedback loops that you can't have for when you sell insurance policies.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, I never really thought about it that way, with the whole feedback loop in terms of how quickly you can kind of assess success. So yeah, that's very interesting. But I guess one of the areas I'm always really interested to talk about and get feedback on, irrespective of sector and domain, is go back to your point earlier about whether there's kind of a standard that we can assess data scientists by. And like I say, I think it's a difficult thing at the moment to do that until we really kind of actually get a full definition around what a data scientist is. But when you're working alongside other data scientists or hiring data scientists for your team, what are the traits, most important traits that you feel quality data scientists should possess, in your opinion, from your experience?
Yeah, I think, as you said, there are myriad definitions of data science, and what I need someone in my team to do is going to be different from the next person. But I think there is sort of one unifying theme, probably across all industries in the 21st century, that I've read a blog post on recently, and that was sort of highlighting the importance of curiosity in the 21st century, where it's the main point of this was that so many things are becoming automated, and really you have to be very careful that your whole career isn't being automated, and that your decision making and actually your whole life isn't being just served up to you by someone else's algorithm, and actually having the curiosity to expand beyond that and look beyond what is immediately in front of you. And I think that is particularly important in a data science field that is a very fast moving area of practice, and where there are, I don't think anyone could stay abreast of all the new papers and all the new bits of research that are coming out there, saying that are promising lots of value, but having that sense of curiosity of wanting to find out more and wanting to not just be content with the way things have been done previously, because that way of doing things should become automated, and so you need to be moving on to the next thing. Yeah.
It's a really great point, actually, because I always look at kind of traits like that, curiosity, things like almost like a mental muscle that you exercise, and obviously the brain being quite plastic in nature, and the neurons that wire together, and obviously the more you practice a certain trait, the more likely you are to be able to continue demonstrating that trait. And it's true, I guess, in the world that we live in, where there's data on tap, and we're moving towards a convenience culture where everything is automated. And I think you could see quite easily how the need to be curious could really be quite passed over by a lot of people and die out, because kind of you've got everything almost.
Yeah, I think interestingly, it's actually demonstrated by sort of very standard interview questions as well in a recruitment process. So typically, what can you tell me about our company? You're starting to talk about asking about some domain knowledge, and maybe you're hiring a grad or someone you wouldn't necessarily expect to, have loads of domain knowledge. But I think you can tell the difference between someone that has just is treating it as a sort of due diligence exercise and just can quote back to you some metrics off of or some information off of Wikipedia about your company, versus the people that have actually had the curiosity to understand why data science is important to your company, and is I mentioned at the beginning how I think that insurance has lots of interesting concepts from a mathematical and societal perspective. So if someone's actually had the curiosity, someone's curiosity has been piqued by that, and they've gone away and thought more about that really shines in an interview. And I see that those sorts of personalities are ones that really dive headfirst into the interesting areas of the team and really settle in well, and the most successful hires, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a really great point, because I think that also transcends to just, I think, interviewing questions in general, and being able to tease out in that kind of scenario, like I said there, it's not necessarily someone that's done the due diligence and is prepared to give you the perfect answer really, that you're looking for. It's actually more you're trying to tease out the thought process, aren't you, and the kind of like I say, I guess the curiosity and just sort of how they genuinely think about things. So that's always a sort of a question when I speak to a lot of managers around their interview techniques and questions that they ask. It's really trying to differentiate between those that give the best answers and those that actually have the right thought processes, if that makes sense, and the right sort of like I say, curiosity, problem solving, whatever it is that you're actually looking for. That's the art to a good interview, I guess, isn't it? Asking the right kind of questions. So fair enough. Well, look, it's been absolutely superb speaking to you, Rolf. Really enjoyed the chat, and I think you share some serious value. Clearly very credible in your particular domain, and definitely some food for thought for me in terms of just a lot of things I never thought about before, actually, specifically related to data science and insurance. So I found it absolutely riveting. So thank you very much for coming on and taking part today, and very much look forward to keeping in touch and seeing you move on to your future successes in this domain.
No worries. Yeah, thank you very much. As I say, I'm very passionate about data science and insurance pricing. And hopefully, sounds like some of that has maybe rubbed off on you. So that's definitely a success from me.
Good man. All right. Well, have a great weekend, and we'll catch up again soon, hopefully.
All right. Cool. Thanks very much.
Okay.